if you're fishing a certain depth range, like say I'm fishing we'll just use the 20-foot range, the 12 to 15-foot range, because that's a fairly common range to catch them cranking once you get over that 12 feet. And there's a lot of baits made to target that depth. But when I'm cranking that depth, I want to give fish a lot of different options. So when I go to the lake and I know I'm going to be cranking most of the day, I'm going to have probably 7 or 8 different crankbaits laid out on the deck. And I'm going to have baits tied on with varying size bodies, with varying size line, to run the exact depth I want. Because I can take let's use a 6XD, for example. Everybody knows what a 6XD is. One of the most popular, probably best-selling crankbait ever made. But I can throw that 6XD on 12-pound line, and I can touch the bottom in 20 on a long cast. If I take that same bait, put it on 15-pound line, I can touch the bottom in 17 and a half, 18. I take that same bait, put it on 17-pound line, I barely touch the bottom in 15. What that does is that lets you control the depth of your bait. So if you're fishing offshore and say you're cranking a rock point that tops out in 16 feet, but it falls off on both sides. If you're throwing that bait on 12-pound line and you make a long cast past it, that bait's gonna hit that point on the slope. So the point's coming up, and let me get this down. So that point's coming up like this, and you make a long cast across it, throwing that 6XD on 12-pound line, it's gonna run 20 feet deep, you know that. So it's gonna plow into the bottom, way down here on the slope, and you've gotta climb it up over that rock, and then when it comes down, it's gonna run off to the side a little bit and then start back running correctly. But what you're doing there is that when that bait hits the bottom on the back face of it and starts climbing, it's not doing nothing, it's just dragging along the bottom. Scarring your line up. It's not a wasted cast, but you're not going to get bit right there. You're going to get bit once that bait careens off the top of the point. So I'm going to want to throw that bait on a line that's going to touch the top, just barely clip the top of it. So anytime you find something isolated like that, it's going to be a great target to crank. And the reason I always start with a crankbait is because, like I said earlier, after studying results, you know, seeing what Kevin and Fritz were doing, crankbaits catch big fish. There's no doubt about it. It will catch the biggest fish in the lake day in and day out. So when I pull up to a piece of isolated structure, my first cast is going to be with that crankbait, because I want to catch the biggest, meanest fish in that brush pile or on that piece of structure, and I feel like that crankbait's the best way to get him 90% of the time. Now, that's not to say I don't have follow-up lures. I'm usually going with a 2 or 3 bait approach when I'm talking about fishing secluded structure. And as I mentioned earlier, I start out cranking. And the way I pick my 3 baits when I'm fishing secluded structure like this is I want a bait that's gonna clip the top of the brush pile, just very tip of it. So if that brush pile's 5 feet off the bottom and 20 feet, I want a crankbait that's gonna run 15 feet deep and just tick the bottom of that, tick the top of that brush. That's going to be the very first bait I'm going to throw on a piece of isolated structure like that. The next bait I'm going to throw is going to be...
It's Mike Iaconelli. This is Bass U TV.
Here's what's awesome about Bass U TV.
You get the top instructors.
You will learn things at Bass U that you will learn nowhere else.
We take the mystery and the myths out of bass fishing.
Real tools that help you catch more fish consistently.
At Bass U TV, shoes are optional.
And I like turtles.
And that's why you want to check out Bass U TV.
Join the Bass U family.
Welcome to Bass U TV.